today we are talking about the ultimate act of courage and independence. We're talking about solo travel. Can you remember the exact moment that you really wanted to break away from the norm and embrace the nomadic lifestyle?
The first time I was a very impressionistic 21-year-old. So that was kind of my first taste into solo traveling and doing whatever I wanted.
Do you have any memories about growing up in Singapore and
I remember from young, I was already journaling, documenting every single day and what we did.
in particular about that first solo experience?
Helped to spur me to do the uncomfortables.
I know that when people are traveling solo, they often think about, oh, well, there's no way that would have happened if I was in a group.
I am a big proponent of solo travel.
Have you ever had any bad experience?
Yeah, I do have some really crazy stories.
What advice do we have for staying safe while exploring the world alone?
I usually go by my gut.
How do you manage loneliness when you're on the road?
Yeah, I get that quite a bit.
Welcome to Nomad Chats, the podcast where we dive into the unfiltered, the real life stories of digital nomads and global adventurers. I'm your host, Sam, and today we are talking about the ultimate act of courage and independence. We're talking about solo travel. I know for so many, the idea of taking on the world alone, that might seem daunting, but our guest today proves that traveling solo isn't just doable, it's transformative. So joining us today is Isabel Leong, a digital nomad and a full-time travel blogger from Singapore who has made the world her home. From 6 months exploring Europe's 16 countries to working holiday visas in New Zealand to 8 immersive months in Japan, Isabel has taken this solo journey and she's turned it into a lifestyle. Her story shows that taking the journey alone, it shouldn't stop you from nomading. Doing it solo, it isn't scary. In fact, it's an adventure that can give you so much more. So, we've invited her here today to share her insights, share her lessons, her tips for anybody who's curious about setting out on their own. Isabel, welcome to Nomad Chats.
Hey Sam, thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. It's amazing to have you. Where in the world are you tuning in from today? I know you're always all over the world. Where are you today?
I'm actually back home in Singapore for a bit, and then I'll be setting off to Bali for in December for the rest of the new year
I love Bali. Are you going to be in Ubud or?
in Canggu. That's
Okay,
where all the
beautiful.
happening is.
Okay, absolutely, definitely. I remember a lot of surfing, much
Mhm.
busier than Ubud, different lifestyle. Are you a surfer or why there?
Yeah, I do like to surf, and also I feel like a lot of the nomad hubs are there. All the gatherings are usually held there, so that's kind of like the central area of Bali. So I like to have a mix of like a community and a bit of nature, and then if I want to hole up, I can just hole up in any cafe I fancy that day.
Amazing. And you mentioned you're back home in Singapore. So do you have a home base or a place you always find yourself returning to?
Yeah, so lately, I mean, after nonstop traveling for who knows how long, a couple of years, I feel like that whole idea of having a routine and a base and some sort of structure kind of it just became more and more prominent, that desire of just wanting to be in one place for a bit. So that's why I've decided this year that I would just kind of stick around Asia for a bit and shuffle between maybe one or two places. And so, well, this so happens to be Singapore and Bali now.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad we're starting there because I know you have so many practical takeaways and pieces of advice for our audience. But I really want to start today's conversation getting to know you a little bit better and really understanding your journey as a nomad and that initial inspiration to take the leap. Can you remember the exact moment that you really wanted to break away from the norm and embrace the nomadic lifestyle?
Yeah, I do have, well, let's say maybe two or three significant milestones. The first time I was a very impressionistic 21-year-old, I decided to do a school exchange So that means you take a semester abroad, right? And so that was kind of my first taste into solo traveling and doing whatever I wanted, visiting a whole new continent for the first time. And so that really helped spark that whole wanderlust. And when I returned back home, resumed my studies, started work, I was still always dreaming of like that type of freedom that I always wanted. And so just so happens I started the travel blog during that time that I was traveling for a semester for about 6 months over, I think, 16 countries in Europe. So I was documenting very furiously. And yeah, so that so happens I started the travel blog then. And then I started reading up more and more travel bloggers and learning that, oh, they actually do it full time. And I wonder if I can do it full time too. And so while I was writing my blog, I was also freelancing as a writer for other publications because I felt like that was my gateway to getting, recognized and established as a travel writer, and then eventually getting invited to trips, which back then was the goal because I had so many places I wanted to go, and it just the world's my oyster. Where do I begin, right? So long story short, I got a press invite to New Zealand. And because I'd been there for my graduation trip with a bunch of friends, did a camper van. Again, it's very novel. It's a very novel experience because coming from Singapore, you don't really, it's a city, right? So you don't really live in a van. You don't really have access to all that nature. So New Zealand really captivated me on that first time on my grad trip. And so when I got that press trip invite, I was like, there's no way in hell I'm gonna miss it. I'm just gonna if the worst case happens, like my boss doesn't allow me to go, I'm just gonna quit. And so that was exactly what happened. And when I went back there, I don't know, I felt like it was a sign. I because I was kind of dreaming of different ways to go back to New Zealand all the time. And so that was when I did applied for my working holiday in New Zealand. And so that was sort of I was satisfying a curiosity of what it's like to live abroad. And that gave me a whole new perspective of what life can be like from coming from a city, working a corporate job to being in a town where the where the nearest supermarket was 3 hours drive away, and the community is very tight because it's small, right? So that was like such a breath of fresh air. And I think since then I became more hooked and decided to get more serious with travel blogging because I felt like that would be my gateway to working remotely and being location independent.
Absolutely. It sounds like it was just moment after moment of you following your curiosity, learning something, and then implementing it, learning something new, implementing it, and taking chances. Looking back now, are you happy that your boss didn't allow you to go on the trip? It was the push you needed.
Yeah, totally. I think I would have done it, regardless, as long as, yeah, with all these opportunities coming up, it's going to be hard to say no. Knowing that I
No
had such a
kidding.
fierce desire to like explore the world.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about growing up in Singapore and how that experience shaped your curiosity about the world. Like you talked a little bit about it being so refreshing, being away from the big city. But do you have any memories about growing up in Singapore and how that could have shaped this outlook you have now of travel and wanderlust and exploring?
Mm, maybe because, yeah, Singapore is a tiny, tiny, tiny little city and a state and a country. So growing up with with my family, my parents took us on trips maybe twice a year, like over the school holidays. So I think that sort of instilled my like I remember from young I was already journaling, documenting every single day and what we did. And I think back then I still wasn't that like crazy into traveling, but I guess because seeing the different culture, seeing how the world is totally different in Singapore, that probably sparked some of that curiosity. So that when I entered university, I knew like we had 4 years in university, and I knew for sure that the exchange was something I would never, never, ever miss.
And you did it at a pretty young age. So not only were you doing solo travel, but you were also doing solo travel while still as a student. And I know that that fear alone is enough of an excuse for people to not take the leap. And that can really prevent them from exploring the world. How did you overcome that? And anything surprised you in particular about that first solo experience?
Yeah, how did I overcome it? I would say because it was an experience that I didn't want to miss for the world. I was already quite adamant about going there. And of course, it would be pretty fearful going for the first time in such a large continent, not knowing anyone. So I think what helped was first having some local friends, which helped ease things in, kind of buffered the culture shock a little bit. And that coupled with just knowing that, well, back then at 21, just knowing that at at the end of this exchange, this semester abroad, I would be then going back to Singapore, getting a full-time job and working for the rest of my life. I wouldn't have this big 6-month period where I could do whatever I want. Help to spur me to do the uncomfortable. So I didn't want to go around waiting for like my Singapore friends who came along with me in order to visit like a new place. Because if I was doing all that waiting around, then I would end up not visiting as many places as I wanted. So yeah, so that was one of the motivations to just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really focused much more on what you could gain instead of what could go wrong, which I think is a big mindset tool that we can have, right? Is intentionally choose to focus on the positives and what I can gain from experience instead of getting stuck on all the reasons why it won't work or anything that can go wrong. And then that pile feels so much bigger. So then you like don't ever open the door for what you really want and what could come in from it. So I love that. Seems like it was almost
Yeah.
natural from you from a young age.
Yeah, that and also that the opportunity might not come again. That was a
Mm,
big motivator.
the fear of missing out.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, pretty much.
That one we all are very motivated by that. So, thank you for sharing that. I know that when people are traveling solo, they often think about, "Oh, well there's no way that would have happened if I was in a group," or "I was only able to have that experience because I was on my own." Is there anything that comes to mind, any memory where it wouldn't have been the same if you had been in a group?
So many. I am a big proponent of solo travel at least once in your life because there's so many experiences that you would never get while you are traveling with someone else. Like I feel like people, you always have this stereotype that, okay, I'm stereotyping, but like
It's okay.
people who are from France are, or like Parisian people are very snobbish and unfriendly, or yeah, like the Scandinavian are not very friendly, things like that. They're very hostile, not super friendly. But when you're alone and well basically more vulnerable and you are forced to, well, however shy you are, you're forced to sometimes have to seek help with strangers. that's when
Mhm.
you can that's when you see the true hospitality of the locals. And I think locals, or whoever, the strangers would be more receptive to helping you out, or be more, I feel like they're friendlier. Maybe I have the advantage of being a woman, but I do feel that people are a bit friendlier, they're a bit more open, they're genuinely interested in learning about you more when you are solo traveling. And it also kind of forces you to get, like, it definitely forces you to get out of your comfort zone and meet new people, and even meet new people that are outside of your usual circle. So that for me was a big, like, it really opened my eyes up to a lot of things and a lot of new perspective, which I still enjoy doing today.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree, and it works both ways. People are more interested in connecting with you when you're on your own, but also you're more interested in connecting with other people. Like when I'm traveling with my husband or I'm traveling with my friends, it's so easy and comfortable to just spend the whole evening, the week, the month with just that person. You're not really forced to move outside of your comfort zone and spark up a conversation and open that door to a new relationship. And I think there's so much uncertainty that comes from opening that door, which is why a lot of people don't. Have you ever had any like bad experiences that made you maybe question, okay, wait a minute, what did I get myself into with this solo travel? Maybe this isn't for me. Or have you been pretty lucky in that way?
Yeah, I do have some really crazy stories as a solo traveler. Okay, so
Can we
this is
hear
a good
them?
one. And this was like, I felt like I was at my lowest point solo traveling and I felt the most vulnerable. So I was basically traveling up from, I was in Mexico and I was with some friends, but then we decided to split up because we had different plans. So I was on my way back to, I was in Puerto Adventurous and then I was traveling back to Cancun. And so on the way, there's Playa del Carmen, which is pretty popular, right? Everyone would have heard of it. And because I was quite involved in Facebook groups, I find that that's a good way to meet new people and also like-minded people. And so I met this other online coach, and I was like an SEO coach at this time. So we decided to like he was like, oh yeah, since you're passing through Playa del Carmen, why don't you just pop over for a few days? I'll show you the best of the city, the area, and then um long story short, he was really nice, very hospitable. He gave me like his room while he slept in the couch. Um, Somehow, when it was like the second last day before I was to leave Playa del Carmen, and the first couple of days he was really sweet and nice, and he was learning a lot from me, and we were exchanging a lot of stories. So when I woke up that day, I reached over my bed to the desk beside me to try and get my phone, check the time. Then I realized it was missing. So I was groggy from sleep. I decided to get out of bed, go to the living room, and something felt missing. Like we both had our laptops on the dining table, and my laptop just disappeared. And then I tried to look for my purse. I was like, oh shit, where the heck is it gone? And so he was sleeping on the couch. I woke him up, asked him what was happening. His laptop was still there on the table. His phone was still there on the living room. And my stuff just mysteriously disappeared. And it's not just it's just my valuables, like the electronics and my purse. So that was like incredibly strange. So he was very helpful with helping me to cut off my credit cards, my helping me to call whatever help I needed, helping me to log
But he
into
had no
my
idea what had happened. He woke up and
yeah
thought it was a
no he
mystery as
was
well. Huh.
yeah he was as clueless as I am. So I was already panicking because all of my work, like I basically live on my laptop, in my laptop. So I was panicking and didn't have any form of communication. So he was helping me like to get a spare phone, and he offered to draw up some cash for me until I got settled and I could PayPal him back. Um, and then suddenly he got a phone call from a friend, and when he put the phone down, he seemed a bit hostile. He was like, "Hey, why can't you get your parents to wire you money through, I don't know, Western Union or something?" So yeah, you could tell from the change of his tone of his voice that he just suddenly seemed very suspicious of me. So I got really pissed off because I'm the one at the losing end here. Um, Long story
Totally.
short, basically his friend was telling him to be wary of me because I probably pulled this and was trying to extort money off of him because I was going to leave the next day, right? And so I was like at my wits' end, had never had this thing happen to me before. And so I was like, you know what, let's just like get together face to face. So we went to his friend's place, and this was the host, which was my then the only contact that I have as well because I didn't know anyone else. He introduced me to his friends. So that was very confronting because they basically, yeah, in my face told me that, I might have been like they were just trying to be defensive to themselves and basically cut off help to me. So I was very, yeah, basically I felt like I'd gone down to nothing because my stuff was stolen. The only connection I had was like, to my parents, which I got through the spare phone, but basically I didn't have any cash on me. Good thing I still have my passport. So I felt very much reliant on them, and I hated that
Mhm.
because they're the ones accusing me, even though they're the ones that probably took it from me because I trusted, myself to be in his home for those couple of days.
And you're so
Well, the
used to being
mystery.
independent. It was probably tough to now all of a sudden be dependent on somebody else. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, and it's like you don't want to get into trouble with them because if they can pull this, what else can happen? And you don't know
yeah.
anyone there. So the mystery still remains, but well, I've wrote this whole story down on my blog, and so it's for anyone to speculate.
Okay. Gosh, well, they definitely sound guilty. That's tough. Well, I'm sorry you experienced that. Could have been worse, could have been better. What do we learn from this experience? Because safety is a big concern for solo travelers. What do you think you could have done or would have done differently next time?
Honestly, he was a really nice person, and I didn't see any red flags at all from him.
What would
So
the red flags be if we wanted to give advice to somebody else?
I usually go by my gut. Like, is he do you feel like he has a motive? Is he trying to make moves on you? Is he being like
Mm,
genuine, or is he being
mm.
fake? Things like that. I think as you travel more and meet more people, you kind of fine tune that intuition, and you're a better judge of people as well. But I mean, I've done a couple of, spontaneous travels with friends that I just met, and sometimes they go right, sometimes they go wrong. And so I'm still trying to fine tune that. But yeah, I will probably have to dial down my spontaneity and dial up my caution, but without losing the fun. That's probably the thing that I would learn from this like situation.
Yeah. Well, I love that you said that you fine tune your ability to read other people and become a better judge of character the more you put yourself in these experiences, because that's definitely a big benefit of solo travel and spending more time on your own is being empowered by independence and being empowered by your own wisdom. So I love that. For those who are new, though, and maybe don't have that
Mm.
wisdom yet, what advice do we have for staying safe while exploring the world alone? Any just key best practices or tips that you'd tell a girlfriend, boyfriend, parent, anybody who's about to go on a trip on their own who might be worried about safety?
Yeah, I would say firstly, probably to pick somewhere that's first world, easy access to everything. It's probably well trodden already. So nothing super off the beaten path, somewhere like a pretty classic itinerary you would expect. So there's that. And then, yeah, solo traveling can be crazy scary. It can be scary in the beginning, especially if it's a new country as well. So I try and ask them to maybe find someone local that you could maybe meet for a day, or even take you around, or even meet for a coffee. And speaking to a local would definitely help to give you a better understanding of that new foreign place that you're visiting. So that would definitely help with, learning about things to be cautioned, to be wary about. And also, you would probably over prepare and over over prepare your itinerary, so you probably know where to go where. You wouldn't want to stay out at late at night. So with that itinerary, you also get to share with someone back home, someone you trust, and so like keeping that person, keeping whoever you are, like a family member back home, not accountable, but keeping them in the loop would help. Daily check-ins with people back home, and also, yeah, just in general, not do anything stupid. Like you wouldn't want to wear flashy jewelry around and risk getting pickpocketed or attacked. You wouldn't want to dress to invite trouble and things like that. Yeah, I think these are the typical tips I would give someone who's doing it for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. For you, it's so second nature. But for some people, it's like, oh, right. I don't wear my flashy jewelry. Okay. I should be more mindful of that. So I think those are great tips. Find a local ally. And it sounds like Facebook groups has been a great resource for you. You get to a location and you find the local Facebook group for nomads or travelers coming through and see if there's any events or connections to be made there. And then also, having a buddy back home, somebody who generally knows where you are, generally knows what location you are and where you're staying maybe, and maybe even has some copies of your passports. I know that that's sometimes advice that I've read where I just send it off to my mom, just a reminder, here's a copy of this in case anything happens. So I love that. You also talked about going to first world countries. So I wanted to ask if there are destinations that you think are particularly great for first time solo travelers.
I would say first time solo travelers. Mm, Europe in general is pretty well traveled. So I would say, even if you wanted to go to Paris or Rome or somewhere, well traveled there, there's always tourists around, there's always people around. You're never really caught alone or in dangerous situations anywhere. But of course, with, well touristed places, there's that risk of pickpocketing and yeah, being targeted that way. But at least, if you're in a well touristy place, you can even join local tours, hop off tours. So it reduces the friction of having to figure things out on your own and being on your own too much. And instead, you could join like local group tours and things like that. I like to particularly whether or not I'm a solo traveler, I like to get introduced to a new place by doing a free walking tour, and that's pretty common in Europe, right? So I think that's a great segue to introducing a new city in the beginning and then getting tips. Like that's your first hand access to the local because the host would be able to give you lots of advice, and if you had, things that you were cautious about, you can also ask the host.
Hmm. What are your take on hostels as a resource for meeting people and learning about the local area? Have you had pretty positive experiences in hostels?
Yeah, I think it's also another option where you wouldn't really meet locals, but you can meet other fellow travelers. And sometimes, if you are social enough, you can do your little mini trips together. I've had a few fair shares of those, and I feel like it's always the easiest way to meet other people to travel together for sure. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, I love that. We've been talking about a lot of the positives of solo travel. We've also touched on some of the scary stories and one of your worst memories or closest calls, as they like to say it. But another big thing that can come up with traveling solo is loneliness, right? Is that
Mhm.
feeling of being super isolated. How do you manage loneliness when you're on the road? What kind of strategies can we share with people who might be solo traveling and wondering if it's for them because they're feeling a little bit off on their own?
Yeah, I get that quite a bit. And especially when you're location independent and working remotely, even the job itself can feel kind of lonely. And so, my strategy to that would be to, yeah, go to Facebook groups and meet local people if you're kind of limited in time and just have a couple of days in one place. That would sometimes be one way. I've known other girlfriends that would go on dating apps to kind of find a local tour guide because you meet someone, you end up going for a coffee or a date or on a date, and then you end up kind of sometimes having a good friend to take you around that city. So that's another one if you're also bold enough to do that. For me, I particularly like going to places that are nomad friendly because I already know we have that in common, and we all work remotely, and we all sort of have that belief and that value, and just the whole idea of the importance of that location freedom type of um, that quality in us. And so that is the commonality that we have, and I feel like it's very easy to be with nomads it's just like you don't really have to worry if that person's weird or if you run out of things to say because we already have that in common. So I like to go to places where it's already pretty nomad friendly. So places like Bansko, Bulgaria, Bali, Indonesia, even Cape Town, South Africa. Everyone keeps thinking that South Africa, especially Cape Town, can be very, very dangerous. And so, yeah, once you're in that area where you know you can find nomads or a community easily, then it definitely breaks down. Yeah, it definitely helps with the loneliness bit because for me at least, like having been traveling so long and as a nomad for so long, it just feels like going back home again because there are things that you can talk about, things that you understand with this group of people that people probably back home wouldn't really understand. So sometimes I do feel like I just belong there, even though I had never met them before.
Mhm. Are your friends back home, are they mostly rooted in Singapore or are they nomadic as well? I'm curious the new friends you've made on the road versus your original friends from back home. Is there one friend group that you feel most close to, or how has that shaped your view on friendship?
Yeah, that's a big topic I like to discuss as well. People back home here, at least my schoolmates and the people that I meet, they definitely would be tied to a job at some point because because the cost of living in Singapore is not very nomad friendly. So, people that I know here, they usually have a full time job and pretty restricted in being remote, you know. So there is that, and there is that practicalities of cost of living and just like yeah, living in Singapore versus friends that I met while I'm traveling, like the other nomad friends. I feel that I definitely feel much closer with them because
Mm.
I think we've already broken that barrier of that the superficiality and the small talk, and we're able to discuss have deeper conversations about happiness, whether you're fulfilled, whether you enjoy certain places, and more crazy stories to bond us over. So, yeah, I feel like my closest friends are now all over the place. They're in Cyprus, Greece. Some of them are in Canada. Some of them are in, Thailand. So it's sometimes a bit sad because like the moment you bond over over time in a place and then because of visa issues or whatsoever, travel plans, you guys have to split up again. So that can be, yeah, that's definitely something we have to deal with.
Mhm. Absolutely. Do you find yourself do planning reunions in different locations in the world where some of your nomad friends live? Like how common is that? Because of course you make a friendship, you make a connection, but maybe you're in the same location for a couple weeks and it's always that like, "Oh, we should meet up again." And, "Oh, in the meantime we'll follow each other on social media." But for me, I haven't done the best job at actually planning the reunion trip. Are you pretty good at that, or what is
Mm.
the culture like?
I would say, well, yeah, as nomads, travels in our DNA, so you'll never really we sort of usually have already a fixed plan or something like that. Or sometimes they just go back home and work remotely. So that's usually, yeah, it varies from people to people. But one, it's a good excuse to maybe visit a place that you've never been before. So like my Cypriot friend, I went to visit her this year in May. So visiting a new country for the first time and reuniting with her. And two, sometimes there are other events, like other nomad events happening, and you kind of just try and pull all of your friends together to attend it because you know that that's something that everyone would be interested in. So because of that, I've had a few nomad friends that I was able to reunite with, like at Bansko every year. So that's really heartwarming. And then lately, I think a friend, like two friends that I've never seen for who knows how long, probably a year already. We reunited in Kopangan, Thailand, and we spent like a good solid month together. So that was again really really comfortable. It's like going back. It's like time never passed between you guys. So that is nice.
That's amazing for sure. And social media can be so helpful where you can follow each other's journeys in between and you're almost like on the same level. Sometimes I feel my friends who aren't traveling or who have 9 to 5s or who have office jobs when I post about this lifestyle, I feel kind of bad because they don't get to experience it too. But your nomad friends, they're equally going on adventures and having
Mm,
a great time. And I feel like it's a much more supportive of you're killing it, I'm killing it, you're seeing the
mhm.
world, I'm seeing the world, and you're just more on an even playing field. I'm not sure if you can relate to that, but at least something that I really feel with social media.
Yeah, I think so. And also sometimes, well, they're more entrepreneurial as well, right? So for
Also
someone who
true.
runs her own business, it's easier to talk to someone. Even people in safety wing I've had like really fun conversations with. I think I met Luke in, well, Chiang Mai or something the
Yeah,
other
he's
days.
in Chiang Mai.
So yeah, so it's really nice to even, yeah, people who work remotely. There's just something about us that's really open and really friendly and really willing to share, and that's really nice to discuss life, discuss work, discuss anything under the sun.
Absolutely. Now, we're nearing the end of this podcast conversation. I could talk to you forever, and I do want to leave you with an opportunity with some final advice, but I thought we'd play a little game. I have some rapid fire questions just to get to know your travel style a bit more. So there's no wrong answer here. I'm going to give you two options, this or that, and you just choose one. How does that sound?
Okay, yeah, bring it on.
Okay. Bring it on. Hiking boots or flip flops?
Ooh, flip flops.
Planned itinerary or go with the flow?
Go with the flow.
Suitcase or backpack?
Suitcase.
Window seat or aisle seat?
Oh, it used to be window, but now I like the convenience, so aisle.
Same. It's very
Yeah,
controversial.
yeah.
Big city buzz or small town charm?
Small town charm.
Working from a cafe or from a co working space?
From a cafe.
Street food or restaurant?
Ooh, street food anytime.
Okay. And final one, sunrise adventures or sunset views?
I'm a sunset girl.
Amazing. Do you ever find yourself specifically going to places where you know they're going to have a good sunset?
Yeah, and there are places where I know they have the best sunsets. Like I feel like LA because there's just no clouds, no rain. So it's always a nice view. And it's west facing, right? Yeah. So it's
Mhm.
always a nice sunset. I feel like Hawaii. I remember being on a surfboard in Oahu and watching the sun melt. So there are a few striking points in my life where I've seen the best sunsets in the world.
Totally. Tamarindo in Costa Rica, West
Yes, I was gonna say
Coast.
that next. Yeah.
Yeah, anywhere on the Pacific coast there in Costa Rica. It's
Mm-hmm.
so stunning. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Well,
Yeah.
you have shared so many highs and lows about solo travel. If anyone is still listening and is hesitant, what is some final pieces of advice that you would share to encourage them to take that leap? Maybe any misconceptions that you think people might have? Final words of wisdom before we wrap up today.
I would say if you're fearful, you could immerse yourself in people that have been there and done that, whether it's actual friends that you've been or even just, yeah, online personalities, and you know that they're giving solo travel tips. And don't be afraid to just reach out as well, like even if you don't know that person, to ask for tips. We're usually pretty, generous with sharing our first-hand experiences. And I think that would help quell some of that fear, that first-time fear away. And above all, I feel like you'll learn more about yourself a lot more than if you didn't do that solo trip. So I definitely would encourage anyone who hasn't done that before to at least try it for the first time. It can be a short trip, it can be a nearby trip, but just do it.
I agree. Well, thank you so much. You are a resource online. You have your blog, you have your social media presence. If our listeners wanted to follow along and learn from you, where should we send them?
Yeah, you can go to Bell Around the World. I'm pretty much on every social media platform, so it's easy to reach out as well.
Amazing. We will also include that in the show notes. Thank you again, Isabel. And thank you, everyone who listened to another episode of Nomad Chats. We will be back in your ears next week. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.